Hey guys, and welcome to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side Girl, and today I am doing my February wrap-up. Again, I'm going to apologize for the boring background and also for the much belated video because I'm in the process of moving, and I also got sick really bad in February and I was just completely out of commission for 2 weeks, so I'm extra behind on my videos with those two things happening. I tend to only get sick when I get stressed out, and moving is extremely stressful, but besides that, I actually managed to read a ton of books in February. I read 14, which is the same amount that I read in January, but we get less days in February. But because I was so sick, I was able to read a lot. That was like the one thing that I could do besides watch TV. So I made it through quite a few books, and I am excited to talk about them. Now, for the month of February, I decided to read all of the paperbacks that I owned and all of the books that or at least a big majority of the books on my TBR list, physical TBR, that I've been kind of iffy about, that I wasn't sure that I was gonna like, just because the paperbacks I wanted to get rid of regardless of liking them, because I like to have all hardbacks, but I do purchase them if they're like extremely cheap for reading. And then also I want to get rid of any books that I really didn't wind up liking or DNFing or all that stuff. So because of that, I had a pretty mediocre reading month. Like, I wasn't crazy in love with very many of these books, and I was disappointed by quite a few of them. But I just kind of want to explain why that. People are like, well, why read the books if you're not sure if you're gonna like them? Because when I do read books, sometimes are these wonderful gems that you wind up just absolutely loving, that you thought maybe you wouldn't like at all, or that you weren't sure if you were gonna like. So anyway, I'm sorry for the kind of mediocre month, but we're just gonna dive right in. Okay, the very first book that I read that I wanted to get into was The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I've been trying to read some of my YouTubers that I enjoy watching's favorite books, and this one is Haley from Haley in Bookland's favorite book, plus a lot of other people. It's kind of become a modern classic. I only had it in this big floppy paperback. It is a very long book, so I wanted to make sure to get into it. Now, I had mixed feelings about this one going in as well as reading it. I loved the writing style. Like, it is so beautiful. It is poetic. It's really interesting. It's very different. This one basically is set in Nazi Germany, and it is about basically an orphan girl that finds a new home, and just things are happening all around the time of World War II. Just all of that kind of stuff happening, and I don't really necessarily like books about that time period just because of how stressful it is. Because of that, while reading this, and because we weren't quite into like the worst parts of World War II, and like they weren't quite aware of what was happening, I was so anxious and stressed out reading this book because I didn't know how dark it was going to get. I didn't know if we were going to go into the concentration camps. I didn't know if people were going to be like tortured and I was going to have to read about it and all that stuff. And really nothing super graphic happened because it is still a YA novel, but I was so like anxious and stressed about reading. Not that I'm against reading dark things, but because it's not a true story, but in a true time period, I don't know. It just gave me a lot of anxiety despite how beautifully it was written and despite how much I really liked the characters. I had to take a break from this like every 150 pages or so. Not because I wanted to stop reading it, because I needed to read something like a little bit lighter, even though it wasn't as heavy as I expected. So I hope that makes sense. But I think that if you like historical fiction, if you like World War II fiction, or if you like heavier reads, that you will definitely like this. I just think that I was kind of in a weird mood while reading it. I did enjoy it overall, but it's not going to be like one of my all-time favorite books like it is for a lot of other people. Sorry you guys, I'm kind of getting over having lost my voice. I sound like really weird and kind of like manly. Next up, I read Anna and the French Kiss, another paperback that I bought. This one has a nice like cover to it. This one is by Stephanie Perkins, and it is set in Paris for the majority of the book. Anna, who is our lead character, gets sent to boarding school for her senior year of high school in Paris by her family, which she does not want to do. She does not want to leave her family or her crushes or her friends or anything like that. She's nervous about being in a completely new country and all of this stuff. So the boarding school she is sent to is actually an American boarding school. I can't remember the name, but it's something like Americans in Paris or something like that. Anyway, when she gets there, she winds up making a whole new group of friends and having a whole new crush and all that kind of stuff that we love from boarding school books. Now, what I absolutely loved about this book is I loved the Paris setting. I loved reading about places that are actually in Paris, little like nuances and things that you could go to Paris and actually see, which is totally cool. And I loved that part of it. I did enjoy like some of the characters. I liked the writing style. I did not enjoy the romance. There were just way too many flaws in it for me. It was just kind of the whole time I was just like, why do you like this guy? Like, this is, I don't know. I feel like young people that read books like this think that this is like a normal beginning of a relationship. And yes, they're immature, and yes, they're 17, and so you're allowed to make mistakes and all that kind of stuff. But it was just too much for me. It was just, there's too much like cheating and guilt tripping and like, I don't know. I was really frustrated through the whole thing, and I was sad because I enjoyed the Paris aspect so much, and I actually liked the characters separate of the situation and all that. But I gave this one 2 stars just because you can read more about my review on Goodreads. But yeah, unfortunately I didn't love this one as much as everybody else did. So then I had, you know, 2 kind of iffy reads, and I'm like frustrated at this point. But thank goodness that I was listening to Ferris by Marissa Meyer. This is 3.5 in the Lunar Chronicles. So this is the background of Queen Lavanna, which is basically the Snow White queen of the story. And this is all about like her growing up in the palace on the moon and what her life was like, and her parents and her sister and everything. And oh my god, I listened to this on audiobook because I've been listening to all of them on audiobook. It was so good. I know a book, especially an audiobook, is really, really good when I will listen to it when I go to sleep, because I only listen to audiobooks while I'm doing stuff. I don't, when I listen to audiobooks to basically do more reading at once, but I don't listen to them at bedtime because I like to read a physical book because I can't do anything else when I'm laying in bed. But this one was so good that I had to listen to it while I was, you know, about to go to sleep, because I wanted to know what was going to happen. And I guess I like the pasts of villains. It was so interesting, and it was so tragic, and it was so heartbreaking, and it was so different than what I expected, and just it made you feel bad for Lavanna, but then not feel bad for her because it's still her fault, kind of. And oh my god, it was so good. Do not skip this one if you have read the Lunar Chronicles or are about to. Like, it is amazing, and I think it would be just as good in book form because her writing style is just so good, and this whole series is just amazing. But I liked this one so much. I gave it 5 stars. I flew through it, and yeah, it's close to my heart. Okay, then I read 4 from the Divergent collection. This is all of 4's short stories compiled into one. I hated reading from 4's perspective in Allegiant, the final book in the Divergent series, and I really didn't enjoy 4 in the books at all. I love him in the movies, or they did a great job portraying him, but I didn't like her writing style for 4 in those books. So when I bought this one, because it's beautiful and because it goes with the collection, I was like, I really don't think I'm gonna like this because the whole thing is from 4's perspective. And I loved it. I loved it. I don't know if it was just because I had a break from Divergent, so that left me with like a clearer head going into this, and I needed that little bit of a break to go into it and just enjoy it. Or if it was because her writing style has matured, because she was very young when she wrote the Divergent series, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying her writing was bad. Divergent was wonderful, but I don't know if like she changed it or tweaked it a little bit maybe. Really, really enjoyed it. I'm really glad that I read it. I will definitely be keeping this one, so that was a nice surprise. Then I read Mirror Mirror by Gregory Maguire because I've been on a big retelling kick. Plus I have almost all of Gregory Maguire's books because they're just so freaking lovely. I mean, look at this. And I have been wanting to read at least one of his books a month to see if I like them, because they're very interesting. They're adult fairy tale retellings. So the one thing that I really don't like about Gregory Maguire's books is that he does a lot of graphic descriptions of like kind of perverted sexual things, like not necessarily about like sexual acts, just weird stuff. Like for example, in this one, her nanny, Snow White's nanny, talks all the time about how she had sex with an octopus, and you could just be like, okay, well the nanny's crazy, but then she literally talks about the the tentacle marks on her body that she got from the octopus, and it's just like weird and kind of pointless. And he does that in all of his books that I've read so far, and I just don't see the point in it, and it's just kind of, it makes you feel kind of gross. That being said, the other thing sometimes I don't like is that because they are adult novels, and his writing style is very old-fashioned, and they're not that old, and it takes a while to get through them. They're just very descriptive and very slow. This one I did not feel that way though. This one read super fast. It's only like 290 pages, but Wicked's only like 350 pages, and it took me a long time to get through that, and I felt like I had to only read it at night when nothing else was going on, so that I wouldn't like miss something and just get all of it in. But I actually really enjoyed this one. This is my favorite book of his so far, and it also makes me want to keep going with him, because I was worried that I only liked him because I love retellings, so I like the original story, which makes me somewhat automatically like the retelling, if that makes sense. And also because his book covers and everything are so beautiful, and they're beautiful together. But I really did enjoy this one, but keep in mind there are those like graphic adult content in a lot of these. This one had a little bit less than Wicked did. I really enjoyed it. It was very historical. It had a lot of like historical things mixed into the story, but a lot of the original story that is needed that's in there. There are still the dwarf, a wicked queen, and like a huntsman, and all of that stuff. So if you like retellings and you feel like you can handle mature content, then Mirror Mirror is great. Then while I was like super sick, I read the Chemical Garden trilogy. I am very thankful for this trilogy for being written so well by Lauren DeStefano. The writing is so beautiful, and it just flows, and you like, it's not one of those like super fast-paced books to where you're like, I gotta know what happens, but you don't have any problem like continuing on. You just want to read because it's just so beautiful and it flows so well. So first we're going to talk about Wither, the first book. So this is a dystopian series. This is set in the future where apparently like between like global warming and also like our own chemical warfare and whatever, all the other countries supposedly have sank into the ocean, and America is the only one standing. Which is not the main plot of the book, but I kind of thought that was like a bit much. But anyway, it's set like in the future, and there is like a plague / disease kind of that happens. So we have developed and genetically engineered our kids to be like the ultimate humans. Like we don't have powers or anything like that, but we're like super healthy, I don't know, strong and vibrant and intelligent. But that group of humans does well and is wonderful. But it turns out when they have kids, their kids die at 20 and 25. The girls die at 20 and the boys die at 25, and everyone completely panics, and basically America gets like thrown to trash, and like everything is working just gets thrown out the window. Girls become basically hunted and wanted for birthing basically, so that they can have kids, so that we can keep the population going until we can find a cure, because these kids are dying off so fast. So we're set in the time where the original kids that are now in their 50s are still alive, and they're gonna live like a normal life, but they're on their second set of kids because their first set of 20-year-olds have died, and they're all trying to find a cure. So our main character basically gets picked up and taken to this like kind of, it's not royal, but like this rich guy's house to be a sister wife for his son with 2 other girls. And it's basically about her living there and trying to escape, and also, you know, making friends with the other wives and all that kind of stuff. It sounds really fast-paced and exciting. It is not fast-paced. It is exciting at times. I just don't want to explain too much because there's just a lot of detail. Our main character talks constantly about being active and doing things, and like she's separated from her twin brother and she wants to get back to him, but like just her proactiveness is not there. She's a very weak character. She thinks and she acts like in her head like she's very strong, but overall she's very weak in my opinion. Like she just doesn't, I don't know, she just kind of lets things happen and keeps waiting for a better moment to do something about it, but the better moments like never really come, if that makes sense. So I really enjoyed it, even though it was like really messed up because like one of the other wives is 14 and they're all supposed to give him kids and like all that kind of stuff and everything, but I enjoyed it enough that I wanted to see what happens and I wanted to see like where it goes from there. Unfortunately, I can't talk about the other two books because I will spoil them, but overall the ending was very unsatisfying. There were so many questions that didn't get answered, and not in the fun like mysterious open-ended way, but in a kind of like a plot hole type of way. There were just so many issues I had with love interests and just relationships in general. Like I have a soft spot for this now because I was literally like in the bathroom reading, this sounds weird, but I was like reading it while I was like blowing my nose and like taking a bath and crying and like trying to distract myself because I was so sick. So now I have kind of an attachment to it because it was powerful enough to distract me from how sick I was, and I was really sick. Plus she's kind of sick in the book so that was kind of warmly comforting, and I will probably keep these. But as far as dystopians go and everything, like I don't know, they were all like 3-star books in my opinion. I know some people will really love these books, maybe if you like The Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that, but it's just go into it not thinking that it's going to be fast-paced. Like I never found it like super slow as in I didn't want to keep reading it, but it's not a fast-paced series except for just a few hit points here and there. So hopefully that was not too confusing, but I am glad that I read them. But meh. Then I read The Winter's Curse by Marie Rutowski because I have this paperback version with like this bite mark in it and I wanted to get rid of this either way, and I do have the other 2 books in hardback. This one is, I thought was dystopian. I thought it was going to be similar. I think I got this one mixed up with The Jewel because I thought this was going to be similar to the last books, the Chemical Garden trilogy, which it was not at all. This is fantasy, but no magic, very political. It's about these different, like, they're not exactly states, but her group of people goes in and takes over this one section of land and enslaves all the people that lived there, who were basically like, they were better at being wealthy and they had beautiful things and all this stuff. They just weren't very strong. This is all before the book starts. The group goes in and takes over their state and enslaves their people. So basically about this girl growing up like thinking this is like normal and okay, and her dad is the war general, and basically she is learning how to be in the military as well, and she has a choice whether she either can get married and basically have kids and be a wife, or she can become a military general type person like her dad. And so it's kind of about that, and she goes to a auction and winds up buying a slave that really appeals to her because the auctioneer presents it as he's a singer and he's a blacksmith and he's handsome and all this stuff. So she buys this slave and she winds up having a stronger connection with the slave and all this stuff. Anyway, this is a slow burn, as a lot of fantasies are. The first 100 pages, like, I didn't want to stop reading, but I was kind of like, I don't know about this. After that, it was very interesting. There were so many political aspects. There were so many things happening that I hadn't read about before. I really enjoyed that there was no magic in this, but it was still fantasy. I never really read a fantasy book that didn't have magic in it, and I love magic books, but I thought that was really unique and different. It ends like super awesome, and there's this cool game that they play called Bite and Sting, which is kind of like it's a card game. Basically, it's kind of like 5-card draw. But yeah, it's, if you like political intrigue with some romance, but not like over the top romance, just like a slow simmering romance in there, then I think you'll really like The Winter's Curse. I'm really excited to read the other two because that will really determine how I feel like overall, obviously. But yeah, that was pretty good. I think I gave this one 3.5 though, just because of it literally did take me 100 pages to like really be on board for it. Oh yeah, there's that. And lastly, I read The Giver. Well, I tried to read The Giver Quartet. I'm still reading the 4th book, but I read the 3 of them. So I read The Giver, Gathering Blue, and Messenger, and then I'm currently reading Sun, which is the last book. I picked these books because they are very short, and also I have the first 2 in paperback, and I want to get rid of these and eventually get the hardback. Anyway, okay, so The Giver, I gave 3.5 stars. I think I would like this more if I hadn't been reading so many other dystopian type books lately, and also just in general. It's also, this is a middle grade series. They are dystopian, but in a different way. Basically, this kid, Jonah, is at his like adult ceremony where he's supposed to get like his job for the community that they're in. So they're in like a utopian society where like really people don't get sick or any of that kind of stuff. They don't get sick, but they also don't have like opinions, and they're not allowed to talk about love, and they have all these really strict rules, but it's been far enough that like nobody really argues about it. They just kind of go along with it. So he's at his ceremony of the 12th, which means when he's 12, he gets to go and find out what job he's going to have in the community, and he leaves his parents and basically never sees them again for the most part and takes on a new job. And he winds up having a very special job. That's all I want to say about that. It's a very short book, so you can just read it and figure it out. This is a classic book, basically. It's on one of my all-time books to read. So now I've read it, I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much as everybody else did. I think maybe because I was sick, I was just a little bit tired when I read it. And also Lois Lowry likes to leave her endings very open, and she doesn't like fully flesh out the world, so that's a little bit disappointing. But it is a middle grade book, so I could kind of see the point, but there's just a lot of good like moral lessons and all that kind of stuff in here, and I can see why it's like such a big deal. Because I was kind of iffy, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to read the rest, and I did take a break, but because they're so short and I had a friend recommend me to continue on, I read Gathering Blue. Now these are basically like companions that kind of tie into it, so it's not taking off where the last book ended, but in a whole new like part of the world, but also kind of dystopian, but in a different way. So this one follows Kira in her community. It is a lot less high tech. They are basically more old school, where they bathe in the river and like all that kind of stuff. She is a cripple. She has a twisted leg that she was born with, and normally in this community they would basically like dispose of crippled babies, but her mother begged the community and they made an exception for her. Well, unfortunately, like right after she was born, her father died in the woods on a hunting expedition, and then her mother, like 10 years later, when she's like, or I think when she's 12, her mother winds up dying and getting sick as well. And Kira is worried because they want to kick her out of the community now that she basically doesn't have parental people to look after her and defend her. So she goes to the like council to plead her case as to why she deserves to stay, and this whole thing happens and she gets a special job, and kind of similar to The Giver. I loved this one. I gave this one 4 stars. I enjoyed this more than The Giver. I liked Kira. I liked the aspect of her being crippled and like overcoming that. I loved her friend Maddie, who is like this younger kid that's just like really rambunctious, and he has a little dog that he calls Branchy, and he talks funny, and she makes this other friend. And then there, of course, there's, you know, corrupt government things happening that she finds out, and like all this kind of stuff, and the forest is dangerous and you're not supposed to go in the forest. So that kind of reminded me of like The Village, basically. This is kind of has like The Village vibes, like from the movie The Village. I just really liked it. It was really fast. Again, very open-ended, which is really annoying, but I really enjoyed this. Then Messenger takes off where Gathering Blue left off a little bit more. So we actually follow her friend Maddie in this one, and I don't want to give too much away because it will give something away from the other book. But anyway, Maddie is in this community, and he's older, and he is learning, trying to figure out what kind of job he's going to have, but his community is basically broke off from like the government rules and all that kind of stuff, and they have their own thing going on, but they have these aspects of like jealousy, and they have problems with too many people trying to come in, and they don't know if they can like take care of everybody. It just has a lot of like, it leaves you with a lot of questions in your head about like what's morally right and wrong, and kind of leaving not everything black and white, but there's always like some gray area, which all of her books do, which I really enjoyed. I liked this one a lot. I like this one second best. So I liked Gathering Blue first, A Messenger, and then The Giver. And this one kind of ties into The Giver like somewhat towards the end, so you get a little bit of clarity there, which is good. This one had a lot better. It still had like a open ending, but not as much as the other two. Lois just leaves like her climaxes are literally like the last 2 pages is when you find out like everything that's going to happen, and I just kind of wanted to continue on a little bit past that. The Sun book that I'm currently reading is doing that a little bit less, so hopefully you all enjoyed that. But I did like this one. I think I gave this one 4 stars as well. So hopefully that wasn't too long. That was my 14 books that I read in February, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully next time I will be in a beautiful house with a bookshelf and all that stuff, and I'll see you guys next time on the bright side. Bye!